The sound of the garage door closing felt like a prison gate. Jack Miller sat on the edge of a sun-faded mattress, the kind with springs that remembered every failure. His hands, once steady, capable, the hands of a man who fixed engines and changed lives, now trembled as he tightened the Velcro on his worn orthopedic sneakers. Cold air seeped in from the thin crack beneath the door. A spider scurried past his foot. He watched it escape under an old bookshelf that held baby clothes and forgotten trophies. None of them his. In the far corner, Nora stirred a dented aluminum pot over a hot plate. Canned soup again. She didn't complain, but Jack could see it in her shoulders in the way they sagged with every stir. Her soft gray hair was pinned up with a plastic clip, and her floral housecoat, washed to the point of transparency, hung loose on her thinner frame. They didn't speak. They hadn't needed to for months. Their silence had shape now. It lived in the corners with the cobwebs breathed through the cracks in the insulation curled up beside them at night, when the cold bit hardest. Then came the knock. Sharp. Rushed. Ashley didn't wait for an answer. She opened the side door with the flat-palmed entitlement of someone who believed everything inside already belonged to her. "You left dishes in the sink again," she snapped. "This isn't a retirement home. I work full-time. The least you could do is—" Jack looked up slowly. His voice was calm, but something inside him had shifted during the night. He'd heard Nora crying again. She thought he was asleep. "Didn't mean to inconvenience you," he said. Ashley narrowed her eyes. "Don't be sarcastic." "I wasn't," Jack replied. "I just didn't realize surviving was considered bad manners now." Nora placed 2 chipped bowls on the crate they used as a table. The soup steamed weakly. Ashley folded her arms. "Look, this was supposed to be temporary. You said that. Now it's been almost a year. I've got 3 kids, a mortgage, and a husband who works double shifts. We can't keep carrying this." Carrying. Jack almost laughed. But he didn't. He only nodded slowly and turned back to his soup. It tasted like water and metal. Later that day, the letter arrived. Ashley had taped it to the inside of the garage door like it was junk mail. "Looks official," she'd said. "Probably another bill." Jack peeled it off with careful fingers. Heavy paper, real ink. Nora noticed too. Inside the letter was short and strange. Legal language mostly. Something about an inheritance. Elias Whitmore. Cousin. Cabin. Tennessee. Jack blinked. Elias. He hadn't heard that name in 30 years. Nora sat beside him, reading over his shoulder. When she reached the end, she said nothing for a long moment. "Then we only met him twice." Jack nodded. "Once at my mother's funeral. He didn't talk to anyone. Just stood in the back like a ghost. And that reunion in Oregon," Nora added. "He brought a book as a gift, a dictionary. Said it was important to use words wisely." Jack laughed, but it came out dry. "Weird guy." "But kind," Nora whispered. Jack folded the letter neatly, his hands surprisingly steady. "He left us something." Nora raised a brow. "A cabin in the woods." "Jack, we're not exactly in shape to play frontier." He looked at her. Really looked. And for the first time in a long while, she didn't seem fragile. She seemed tired, but tired people could still make choices. "Maybe it's a dump," Jack admitted. "Maybe it's worthless. But maybe it's not. What if this is the one time something actually breaks our way?" Ora said nothing, but her hand closed over his. That night, over their quiet dinner, Jack told Ashley. She laughed sharp, almost cruel. "Oh my God. Are you serious? You're gonna go live in a shack in the Tennessee woods? You can barely walk to the mailbox, Dad." Jack nodded slowly. "Maybe. But it's ours, and we're going to see it." Ashley's face twisted. "After everything we've done for you, you're gonna run off chasing fairy tales." Jack looked her straight in the eyes. "We gave you everything," he said softly. "And you gave us a garage." Ashley stared speechless. The next morning, Jack and Nora packed what little they had. A Bible, Jack's toolbox down to just the essentials now, and a few faded photos in a manila envelope. Nora wrapped 2 bowls in a towel. They only owned 4. It felt right to take half. At the bus station, Jack struggled with his duffel, refusing help. Nora didn't offer it. They'd learned that dignity, like strength, came from holding on even when it hurt. As they waited, Jack glanced over at his wife. "You still think this is crazy?" he asked. Nora smiled, and the lines around her eyes softened. "I know it is," she said. "But sometimes crazy is the only thing left that feels real." The bus pulled in. Dust rose. Brakes hissed. Doors opened. They stepped on together. The seats smelled like old vinyl and hand sanitizer. Jack sat by the window, watching the city shrink behind them. Buildings blurred into trees. Trees into silence. He reached into his coat and unfolded the letter again. Reread the line, "You are the sole beneficiaries of the estate of Elias Whitmore. No children. No strings. No mention of Ashley, or Kyle, or Lauren, or Ethan. Just him and Nora." For the first time in a long time, Jack didn't feel small. He felt like something unfinished had just begun. The ride through Kentucky was long and quiet. Trees leaned into the highway like they were watching the bus roll past, whispering among themselves. Jack Miller sat stiffly by the window, the letter from the attorney folded neatly in his jacket pocket. He hadn't reread it today. He didn't need to. The words had already etched themselves into the inside of his skull. "You are the sole beneficiaries." Strange how even hope could weigh so much. Nora sat beside him, her head resting gently against his shoulder. They hadn't spoken much since leaving Ohio, but not out of distance. There was a kind of calm between them now. It was the first time in years they were headed somewhere that didn't feel like a dead end. Until Jack's phone rang. He stared at the screen. Ashley. For a moment, he considered ignoring it, but something told him better. He answered with a quiet, "Hello, Dad." Ashley's voice snapped, immediately sharp and impatient. What the hell is going on? Jack glanced sideways at Nora, then turned back to the window. What do you mean? You didn't just up and leave town with Mom without telling anyone. And now Kyle's calling me saying he heard some cousin left you land in Tennessee. Is that true? Jack's hand clenched tighter around the phone. It's true. A pause, then laughter, the kind that cuts. You're kidding me. You really think some random cabin in the woods is your way out? It's not about getting out, Jack replied evenly. It's about going somewhere. Another pause. You need to be smart about this. You can't handle property, Dad. You're 74. You can't even climb a ladder. Jack exhaled through his nose. He kept his voice level. We're not asking for your opinion. Dad, come on, Ashley snapped. Think about this. You're being irrational. You could fall and break your hip out there. You and Mom are going to freeze to death, and then what? That place is probably full of rats and mold. Jack's lip twitched. If it's just a shack, he said quietly, why are you so eager to take it? Silence. He could picture her face then, that frozen moment when a person realizes their mask has slipped. He imagined her standing in her spotless kitchen, perfectly manicured nails wrapped around a phone already calculating. Ashley recovered fast. I'm not trying to take anything. I'm just saying, if you do go, you should sign the deed over to me. I can handle the sale. That way you won't have to worry about paperwork or taxes or anything like that. Jack didn't answer. Ashley went on, her voice shifting from controlling to syrupy. Dad, seriously, I just want what's best for you two. Let me help, we're going to see it, Jack said finally. That's all. Ashley's patience snapped. You're being difficult. After everything we've done for you. Goodbye, Ashley. He ended the call. Nora turned to him, brows raised. Jack didn't say anything for a moment. Then he repeated his own words, this time with a bitter smile. If it's just a shack, why are they so eager to take it? Nora nodded slowly. They're circling already, like vultures. They didn't talk to anyone else for the rest of the day. When the bus stopped in a small Kentucky town for a layover, they got sandwiches and coffee sitting alone at a plastic table in the corner. Jack felt the weight of something shifting in his chest, not anger, not exactly, but something close to clarity. The next day they called the others. Dylan answered on speaker, his voice booming through the tiny speaker. You finally won the hillbilly lottery, huh? It's not a lottery, Jack said calmly. It's just a cabin. So why the big secret? Dylan demanded. You think we're going to try to take it from you or something? Jack didn't answer. Dylan laughed. Come on, old man. You still owe me for that bail money. You think this changes anything? Jack spoke carefully. That wasn't a loan, Dylan. That was your mother and I trying to help you. We don't owe you anything. Click. Disconnected. Nora called Lauren next. No answer. A text came 5 minutes later. Busy. Hope you're okay. Finally, Ethan, sweet Ethan. Jack waited until the evening before calling. The youngest of the four, he had always been the quiet one. Still called on holidays. Still sent the occasional picture of his dog. Ethan picked up on the second ring. Hey, Dad. Hey, son. He sounded tired. Honest. I heard from Ashley, Ethan said after a pause. She's worked up. She usually is. Is it true? Ethan asked. About the inheritance, Jack didn't dodge. Yes. It's a cabin. Some land. That's all. Ethan was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, I hope it brings you peace. Jack blinked. What I mean it, Ethan said. I know how things have been. I know we haven't always been fair. Jack swallowed something sharp. Thank you. I hope you and Mom find whatever you've been missing. When the call ended, Jack sat in the darkened bus with his phone resting on his thigh. He felt something crack open inside him. Not quite forgiveness, but a beginning. The Smoky Mountains appeared on the horizon the next morning, rising like a spine of sleeping giants. The bus turned onto winding roads. Trees pressed in closer. Civilization peeled away with every mile. They arrived in Blue Hollow by mid-afternoon. It wasn't much a diner, a general store, a tiny post office, and not much else. The town looked like it had been paused in the 1950s and forgotten by time. Harold Finch was waiting for them in the lot, leaning against a dusty Ford pickup with a rusted front bumper and Montana plates. Jack and Nora Miller, he asked. That's us. He smiled. I'm Harold Finch. Welcome to Tennessee. Let's get you to that cabin. They loaded their bags into the back of the truck. As they drove, Finch explained what he knew. Elias bought the land back in '62, paid in cash, built the place himself over a couple of summers. Jack asked, "Why us?" Finch glanced at him in the rearview mirror. All he ever said was, "They're good people. They've suffered enough." Nora turned to Jack and whispered, "Why does that feel heavier than it sounds?" The road turned from paved to gravel, then from gravel to dirt. The trees grew taller, older. The last mile felt like the world had dropped away entirely. They reached the clearing just as the sun began to set, and there, nestled between pine and shadow, was the cabin. 2 stories, hand-hewn logs, a stone chimney reaching into the sky. Nora gasped softly. Jack didn't speak. He just stepped out of the truck and stared at it like a man who'd finally reached the place he'd been walking toward his whole life. Inside, the air smelled of cedar and silence. A brass key turned easily in the lock. They stepped inside together. What they didn't know, what they couldn't know, was that beneath the floor they stood on, beneath the hearth Elias had built with his own hands, was a secret vault that would change everything they thought they understood about family legacy and the true price of kindness. But for now, there was only warmth and peace. The front door creaked open like an old man's sigh. Jack stepped inside first, letting the scent of cedar dust and something faintly sweet, maybe pine or old tobacco, hit him all at once. Nora followed her steps, light, cautious. Neither of them spoke. It felt like speaking too soon might wake something that had been sleeping for years. The cabin wasn't large, but it had presence. A spine. Hand-hewn logs formed the walls, joined by visible pegs, not nails. The floor creaked underfoot, but it was sturdy. In the main room stood a large stone fireplace, the kind that wasn't just decoration, but survival. 2 chairs sat by it, matching, worn and waiting. Above the mantel hung a black and white photo of Elias Whitmore, in uniform, maybe early 1960s, standing beside the same cabin they were in now, his hand resting on the chimney like it was his child. Jack pulled off his coat. "It smells like it remembers people." Nora ran her fingers along the mantel. "This place has a heartbeat." They walked through each room slowly. Kitchen. 1 small bedroom. A back pantry that had been converted into a workspace with shelves full of neatly labeled jars, herbs, seeds, rusted nails, brass hinges. In one corner, a cot folded up against the wall beside a stack of books tied with twine. On a table by the window sat a notebook. Jack opened it. Simple handwriting in clean blue ink. Daily logs. Wood split. Pipes held. Roof leak fixed. Visitor Frank again brought bear jerky. Jack raised an eyebrow. "Seems like Elias kept himself busy." Nora sat down in one of the chairs. The cushion hissed under her weight. She looked out the window toward the tree line. "This is the first place in years I don't feel like I'm intruding." Jack didn't say anything, but he knew exactly what she meant. Every couch they'd slept on. Every too small space they'd been offered. This cabin, this gift felt like a full breath after years of shallow ones. There was a knock at the door. Jack froze. Nora tensed, but Jack moved first, stepping lightly, carefully, his hand brushing the countertop where a kitchen knife lay. Just in case. He opened the door halfway. A man stood there in a red flannel shirt, gray beard down to his collar, hands rough and thick as firewood. He didn't smile, but he didn't threaten either. "You must be the Millers." Jack nodded. "Name's Frank Jones. Neighbor, if you can call it that." "I'm about 2 miles yonder that way," he said, gesturing over his shoulder to the woods. "Knew Elias." Dropped by every now and then. Jack opened the door wider. Appreciate the visit. Frank nodded once and looked over Jack's shoulder. She your wife? Jack turned. Nora. Frank gave her a respectful nod. Heard about y'all. Word spreads even out here. Nora rose from the chair. Hope that's not a bad thing. Frank huffed. Out here, bad news takes longer to get traction. He pulled a wrapped bundle from his coat pocket. Brought you something. Inside was a loaf of cornbread and a jar of preserves. Blackberry. Nora blinked. Don't get visitors much, Frank said. Figured this was the neighborly thing. Thank you, Jack said, genuinely taken aback. Frank nodded toward the chimney. Elias built that with Riverstone. Took him 3 summers. Said if the rest of the house burned down, he wanted that to survive. Jack looked at the hearth. It probably would. Frank stepped inside slowly, looking around like he was measuring memory. He lived simple, but he lived well. Never took more than he needed. Gave more than he got. Jack and Nora exchanged a glance. Frank caught it. You're wondering why he left it to you? Jack nodded. Frank shrugged. Man didn't say much, but he told me once, they understand the cost of quiet. I reckon that was about you. Silence settled again, comfortable this time. Frank glanced at the sky. Snow's coming in 2 days. Y'all need anything tools, firewood, help, I'm around. With that, he tipped his cap and left. Jack watched him disappear into the trees. That night, they lit a fire in the hearth. Nora cooked rice and beans on the gas stove. Jack fixed a leaky pipe under the sink. It wasn't glamorous, but it was theirs. They found linens in a cedar chest, quilts that still smelled faintly of lavender. They slept in the bedroom under a window that framed the moonlight like a painting. Jack woke at 3 a.m. to silence. Not city silence, true silence. He sat up and stared into the dark. That strange weight again, like the cabin was breathing. The next morning they explored outside. Jack found an old tool shed locked with a rusty padlock. He made a mental note to get it open. Behind the cabin near the chimney's base, Nora noticed something odd. One of the stones was a slightly different shade, like it had been scrubbed or replaced. She crouched down, touched it. It was loose, just a little. Jack, she called. He joined her, pried at the stone. It shifted slightly, but didn't budge. Think it's just wear, Nora asked. Maybe. But neither of them believed that. They spent the afternoon settling in. Jack swept out dust, fixed a loose step on the front porch. Nora cataloged the books Elias left behind, everything from farming manuals to poetry to economics. As the sun lowered, painting the treetops orange, Nora stood by the window and whispered, sometimes freedom smells like wood smoke and pine. Jack, standing by the fire, looked up at her. Say that again. She smiled softly. It's just how I feel here. Like we can finally exhale. Jack looked around. At the cabin, the fire, the silence. He nodded. Yeah, that's exactly it. Later that evening, while flipping through Elias's logbook, Jack noticed something odd. Most entries were plain and functional weather repair supplies. But near the back, a line stood out, underlined in red ink. Do not open unless you're ready to carry the weight. No date. No explanation. Just that. He showed it to Nora. She stared at the words, then at the fireplace. You think... Jack didn't answer. He just stared at the place where the stone had shifted. The wind howled that night. Pine trees swayed like shadows in prayer. Jack lay awake in the dark, staring at the ceiling. Something in this house was waiting, and he was starting to believe Elias had left them more than just timber and walls. The wind pressed against the cabin all night, testing it like a hand feeling for weakness, but the walls held same as they had for decades. In the quiet before dawn, Nora lay awake, eyes fixed on the ceiling. Something wasn't letting her rest. It wasn't fear. It was tension. A presence, maybe. A feeling that the cabin was aware of them now, watching, waiting. She turned toward Jack, asleep and breathing heavy. She didn't want to wake him, not yet. She slipped on her robe, stepped barefoot into the main room, and stood near the fireplace. The stone, the one with the strange color shift, was still there, still loose. She crouched, pressed her palm to it again. Warm. Not hot, but definitely warmer than the others. She pulled her hand back slowly. There was something alive in this place, and it wasn't just memory. Jack stirred awake when the scent of coffee reached him. Nora never made coffee before sunrise unless something was wrong. He shuffled into the kitchen, rubbing his eyes. "You're up early." Nora didn't look away from the fireplace. "That stone. It's loose, Jack. And warm." He blinked, still shaking off sleep. "You touched it again." She nodded. "It doesn't feel right. Or maybe it does. That's the problem." Jack poured himself a mug and stared at the hearth. What if Elias meant for us to find something, that journal entry? "Don't open unless you're ready to carry the weight." You think that was about this? Nora didn't answer. She didn't have to. They spent the morning trying to ignore it. Jack worked on the front porch steps while Nora cleaned out the pantry. But it hovered over them, that stone, that warmth, the whisper of something just beneath the floor. By noon, Jack gave up pretending. "I'm going into town," he said. "I want to talk to someone who knew Elias longer than just neighbor small talk." "Clara Bell," Nora said immediately. "Frank mentioned her. She ran the general store for decades." Jack nodded. "You coming?" She shook her head. "No. I'll stay here. Watch the cabin." He hesitated, then reached for his coat. "Keep the fireplace cold. Let's see if that stone stays warm anyway." The drive into Blue Hollow was a slow wind through trees and shadow. Jack stopped at the general store around 12:30. A single bell rang as he stepped inside. It smelled like pickles and pine cleaner. Behind the counter stood a woman in her late 70s, thin but upright hair pinned back with old-fashioned curls. Her glasses hung on a chain around her neck. She looked up as Jack entered. "You must be one of the Millers." Jack nodded. "Jack. My wife's Nora." "We're Elias's pick," she said, nodding. "He told me once he'd leave that place to someone who'd appreciate it." Jack blinked. He said that Clara smiled. Not in so many words. But he talked about you. Not often. But enough. Jack stepped closer. "You knew him well. I knew the version he let people see," she said, pouring coffee from a thermos behind the counter. "The quiet man with wild eyes and old secrets." Jack accepted the coffee, took a sip. "Did he have anything hidden at the cabin?" Clara tilted her head. "You found the fireplace, didn't you?" That made Jack pause. She chuckled at his expression. "You're not the first to feel it. That stone, it has a pulse." He used to sit by that fire every night, stare at it, like it owed him an answer. "What's behind it?" "I don't know," Clara said honestly. "But I do know this: Elias didn't trust banks. Didn't trust lawyers either, except Finch. He believed in keeping things close. If there was something worth hiding, that's where he'd put it." Jack leaned on the counter. Did he ever say why he chose us? Clara grew quiet. Then, you remember the year your son Michael got arrested? Jack stiffened. Yeah. Elias followed the papers. Small-town grapevine reaches far. He read every word. And he said to me, that man Jack, he kept showing up to court. Even when his kids turned their backs on him, he stayed upright. He admired that. Jack swallowed hard. The coffee suddenly tasted like nothing. Clara continued. He didn't want to give his life's work to people who'd sell it for quick cash. He wanted someone who'd keep it rooted. Jack left with a jar of honey and a head full of questions. Back at the cabin, Nora greeted him with a wordless nod. She pointed to the fireplace. It's still warm, she said, and I haven't lit anything all day. Jack set the honey on the table. We need to open it. Together they worked on the stone that night. Jack used a crowbar from the shed, gently wedging it beneath the warm stone. It took effort, slow, patient work. But finally, with a low crack, it shifted. Behind it wasn't fire brick, but black iron. A panel, seamless. No hinges, no handle. They stood back, catching their breath. Is it a safe? Nora asked. Could be a hatch. Nora stepped forward, ran her fingers along the edge. There, a notch, a tiny keyhole. Jack remembered the small key hanging from Elias's journal. He'd dismissed it as decorative. He ran to get it. It slid in like it had been waiting. The iron panel clicked and popped forward an inch. Together they pulled it open. A gust of cold air whooshed up from the dark space below. It smelled of earthstone and something older, like secrets too heavy for words. A staircase spiraled downward, built into the foundation. Neither of them moved. After a long pause, Jack said, We don't go down tonight. Nora nodded. Tomorrow. In daylight. They sealed the hatch and reinserted the stone. It locked back into place with a quiet finality. That night they didn't speak much. Both lay awake. Jack stared at the ceiling. Nora whispered into the dark. What if it's something dangerous? Jack thought for a long moment. Then said, What if it's something true? The next morning, the first snow began to fall, and below their cabin, hidden beneath stone and iron, truth waited in the dark. The first snow lay like lace across the roof of the cabin. It muffled the world, made every sound feel distant and sacred. Jack stood at the hearth, staring at the stone he and Nora had pulled out the night before. Now it looked innocent again, just part of the fireplace. Ordinary. But nothing about that stone was ordinary. They didn't speak as they ate breakfast. Just eggs, toast, and a strange tension neither of them named. Jack moved slower than usual, as if bracing for something. Nora kept glancing toward the hearth, like it might vanish, or worse, open by itself. At exactly 9:30, Jack took the key from the mantel, the one they'd found in Elias's journal. He held it in his hand for a long moment, before sliding it into his coat pocket. You ready? He asked. Nora tightened her scarf and nodded. Let's meet the past. The hatch creaked as they opened it. Cold air met them again, still dry, still tinged with that deep earth smell. Jack clicked on a flashlight and aimed it downward. A spiral staircase carved into stone led beneath the cabin. It wasn't steep, but it dropped deeper than either of them had expected. Nora went first. Her hand trailed along the wall as she moved the flashlight, casting nervous shadows. Jack followed one step at a time. Neither spoke. The air thickened as they descended, cool, dry, and absolutely still. At the bottom, the stone opened into a wide chamber. It was beautiful. The space was built like a wine cellar but felt like a museum vault. Wooden crates, metal shelving, glass cases. A few heavy rugs softened the stone floor. There were lamps wired to a solar battery in the corner, still functional. Nora found the switch and flipped it. Warm yellow light filled the room. They stood, stunned. Paintings, actual paintings, lined the walls. Framed, preserved, covered in glass. Some were signed Pollock. De Kooning. One looked eerily like a lost Rothko. Jack blinked. Is this real? Nora moved to a crate, brushed off dust, and opened it. Books, first editions, old bindings in pristine condition. One was marked property of T.S. Eliot. Another bore a handwritten dedication to Elias Whitmore from someone named Alan Watts. Jack moved to a shelf that held a row of small velvet boxes. Inside, antique coins, gold ingots, silver bars. And beside it all, in a climate-sealed drawer, stock certificates. Dozens of them. IBM, AT&T, Ford, Apple. Jack exhaled slowly. This isn't just money. Nora's voice was barely a whisper. It's preservation. Jack nodded, stunned. People hoard things. But Elias preserved. Every item was carefully labeled, catalogued. A ledger sat open on a desk against the far wall, handwritten in Elias's same steady script. Each object was dated, appraised, and noted with a short, personal comment. Jack read one aloud, Pollock piece traded for an old Harley in '68. Foolish then. Valuable now. Nora looked around. Why keep it all down here? Why hide it? Jack turned to her. Because up there, he said, pointing at the ceiling above them, was where he lived. This was who he was. They stood in silence for a while, the weight of it all settling on them like dust. Then Jack opened another cabinet carefully and found something strange: photographs. Dozens of them. Family gatherings, weddings, children playing in backyards. Black and white images turned sepia with time. At the back of the stack was a photo of Jack himself, decades ago, standing with a young Michael outside a courthouse. Jack felt his stomach drop. He showed it to Nora. He was watching us. She studied it. No, not watching. Remembering. Jack sat down heavily on the wooden chair at the desk. We were never close. We only met him twice. Nora sat beside him, but that was enough for him to know who we were. Jack picked up the ledger again and flipped to the final page. There, in Elias's handwriting, was a letter to Jack and Nora. If you're reading this, it means I've gone and you've found the heart of my house. I built this vault not because I trusted no one, but because I trusted only a few. You were among them. This isn't fortune. It's responsibility. These aren't just assets. They're pieces of history, moments of beauty, echoes of things that mattered. You can sell them. You can keep them. You can burn them if you wish. But whatever you do, don't waste them. Preserve what matters. And protect it from those who can't understand the difference between price and value. Elias Jack folded the letter slowly, like it might crumble. Nora reached for his hand. He saw something in us. He shook his head. No. He saw what we could be, what we still might be. They stayed down there for hours, going through each crate like archaeologists uncovering their own legacy. When they finally came back up, it was dusk. The cabin above felt smaller now, humbler, but no less comforting. Jack sat by the fireplace, staring at the flames. Nora brought him tea, sat beside him, both of them still processing what they'd discovered. What do we do now? She asked. Jack was quiet for a long time. Then we don't tell the kids. Nora nodded. They'll smell money before they see meaning, she said. Jack looked toward the hearth. This place, it's not just a gift. It's a line in the sand. Outside, snow continued to fall. They didn't sleep much that night. Both lay awake thinking about the vault, about Elias, about what would happen next, because something this valuable couldn't stay hidden for long. The next morning, Jack made the call to Harold Finch. I need to talk to you, he said. It's urgent. Finch didn't ask questions. I'll be there tomorrow. Jack hung up and turned to Nora. It's time to make it legal, he said. She raised an eyebrow. And to protect it, he nodded. But even as he said the words, he knew. Protecting something meant defending it. And defending it meant someone somewhere would try to take it. By the time Harold Finch pulled up in his weather-beaten truck the next morning, the sun had barely cleared the ridge. Mist clung low to the trees, and the cabin's chimney coughed a thin stream of smoke into the cold air. Jack was already outside stacking firewood. His hands ached with the cold, but he needed them busy. There was too much in his head that refused to sit still. Harold stepped out of the truck, slowly wearing a thick coat and a look that said he hadn't slept much either. You said it was urgent, he greeted. Jack nodded. You better come in. Nora had laid out coffee and a plate of warm biscuits. She didn't say much. Her eyes stayed sharp, steady, like she was bracing for a truth she'd already guessed. They sat in the living room close to the fire. Jack didn't waste time. We found something beneath the cabin. Harold didn't flinch. He stirred sugar into his coffee and said, Elias always said the most important parts of a home were the ones no one could see. We thought it might be a storm cellar, Jack continued. But it's more than that. There's art stock certificates, antique coins, a whole vault meticulously cataloged. Harold finally looked up. He left it to you. He did. But not just the cabin. All of it. Everything. That ledger, he made it clear this wasn't just a gift. It was a responsibility. Harold leaned back, a slow breath escaping him. I knew there was more. He hinted at it near the end. Asked me to make sure the legal groundwork was bulletproof. Trust accounts, title transfers, even power of attorney in case something happened. But he never told me the full extent. Jack glanced toward the fireplace where the hidden hatch now sat closed again beneath the stone. He didn't want the wrong people to know. Smart, Harold muttered. Because now that you know, others will too. Nora's voice cut in sharp. Ashley called again this morning. She wants us to come back for a family meeting. Harold nodded slowly. The vultures are circling. Jack frowned. Can they challenge the will? Not easily, Harold said. Elias named you both as sole beneficiaries through a private trust. It bypasses probate. It's airtight unless someone finds a way to manipulate you out of it. Jack was quiet. Then he said, This place isn't just valuable. It's vulnerable. Harold took a long sip of his coffee. Then we have to lock it down legally, strategically, and quietly. How, Nora asked. First, we file official claim on the land and its mineral rights, if Elias didn't already. Then we transfer the cabin into an irrevocable trust under your names. That makes it harder for anyone to pressure you into selling. And the contents, Jack asked. The vault. Harold hesitated. That's trickier. Unless it was declared it's technically found property. You'd have to document it, appraise it, but doing so puts it on the radar of every government agency and collector within 500 miles. Nora crossed her arms. So either we hide it and risk losing it, or expose it and risk everyone coming for it. Harold nodded. Exactly. A heavy silence fell. Then Jack said, almost to himself, "Some inherit money, others inherit war." Harold looked at him. "Elias trusted you for a reason. He knew this wasn't just about what's down there, it's about who you'll become because of it." Jack's jaw tightened. "I'm not looking to become anyone new, no," Harold said, leaning forward. "But you're already not who you were in that garage." Nora reached for Jack's hand. He let her take it. "What do you suggest?" she asked Harold. He pulled a folder from his bag and spread it on the table. "First, we document what we can privately. Photos, notes. I have a contact in Nashville who specializes in estate preservation. Trustworthy, discreet. We can get basic appraisals without drawing attention." Jack nodded. "And if someone does find out Harold didn't sugarcoat it, then you're going to have to decide who you can trust and how far you're willing to go to protect what's yours." They spent the rest of the day cataloging the vault, photographing every item, creating backup records. Jack and Nora moved slowly, carefully, treating every painting, coin, and document like it might disappear if touched the wrong way. By nightfall, they were exhausted. Not physically, spiritually. Jack sat by the fire, rubbing his temples. "This isn't what I expected from retirement." Harold chuckled. "You think this is retirement? This is just the second act." Nora came over with 2 cups of tea. She handed one to Harold and sat across from them both. "You've known Elias for decades. Was there ever anyone else, anyone who thought they had a claim on him?" "Friends. Distant relatives," Harold hesitated. "There was one." Jack and Nora leaned in. "Name was Dennis Croft," Harold said. "Used to be in the army with Elias, served overseas. They were close, once real close, but something happened between them. Elias never said what, but he cut Dennis off completely. Changed locks, unlisted number, wrote him out of everything." "You think he knows about the vault?" Jack asked. "If he does," Harold said darkly, "he'll come for it." Nora frowned. "Why does that sound like a warning?" Harold stood, pulling on his coat. "Because it is." Before he left, he placed a sealed envelope on the kitchen table. "That's a copy of the trust paperwork. Keep it somewhere safe. Not here. Safety deposit box in town, maybe?" Jack nodded. As Harold opened the front door, snow flurries whirled in with the cold air. He turned back. "Whatever Elias left you, it wasn't just things. It was trust. Don't squander it." The door closed. Jack stood in the center of the room for a long time after Harold left. Nora moved behind him, wrapped her arms around his waist. "We're in this now," she whispered. He nodded. "Yeah. And the storm's coming." The next morning, Jack stepped outside to find fresh tire tracks in the snow. But Harold had parked on the other side of the house. These came from the woods, not from the road. Someone had been there watching, waiting. The tire tracks didn't lie. They ran fresh through the snow, parallel grooves, pressing deep, curving in from the woods, and stopping just 20 yards from the cabin's back porch. No other marks. No footprints. Whoever had been there hadn't come to visit. They'd come to watch. Jack stood in the snow with a tight jaw, hands clenched into fists in his coat pockets. The cold didn't bother him. It was the feeling in his chest, tight, hot, unfamiliar. Fear, maybe, or rage. He couldn't tell them apart anymore. He walked slowly along the tracks, following their path, until they disappeared into the tree line. No sign of who it was. No cigarette butts. No trash. Just a stillness that didn't feel natural. He didn't like it. It was too clean. By the time he stepped back inside, his boots were soaked. Nora met him at the door, her eyes already narrowed. She'd seen the tracks, too. "They didn't knock," she said, voice sharp. "No," Jack muttered. "They wanted us to know they were here. That's all." Nora crossed her arms. "Then why not come all the way up to the porch?" "Because they're testing the fence," Jack said, "seeing how close they can get before we react." They didn't say much after that. Not at first. But something had shifted in the air around them, like the house itself had tensed. The fire crackled lower. Shadows stuck to corners longer. The silence of the mountains no longer felt peaceful. It felt expectant. Later that afternoon, while Jack double-checked the locks and reset the latch on the back door, Nora stood at the window facing the woods. "Do you think it's Croft?" she asked softly. Jack looked up from the bolt he was tightening. "If it is, he's not alone." Nora turned from the glass. "You mean the kids?" Jack hesitated. "I mean anyone with ears. If even one person hears what's buried under this cabin, we'll have strangers from 5 states knocking on the door. Croft. Our kids. The government. Doesn't matter. Greed smells blood." Nora walked across the room and picked up the ledger Elias had left. She flipped to the back, tracing the handwritten inventory. Then she paused. "What's this?" she asked, tapping a small note in the corner of the last page. Jack took it from her and squinted. In faded ink it read, "If he ever returns, tell him the weight is exactly where he left it." They exchanged a long glance. Croft, Jack said. Nora nodded slowly. This was written for him. Jack shut the book. "Then that confirms it." Elias knew he'd come back one day. And right then, like the universe had been waiting for its cue, a knock echoed through the front door. Not loud, not fast, just deliberate. Jack stared at the door, frozen. Nora moved behind him, her hand slipping into his. He opened it slowly. A man stood on the porch, tall, lean, mid-60s but still fit. He wore a tailored black coat, boots clean despite the snow gloves that looked like they'd never touched real work. His face was weathered, but his eyes were sharp, controlled. "Jack Miller," he said with a nod. Jack stepped outside, not opening the door any wider than necessary. "You are—" The man smiled. "Name's Dennis Croft." There it was. The name sounded heavier out loud, like it had mass. Jack didn't speak, just watched. "I knew," Elias Croft said. "Served with him. Long time ago." Jack's voice was calm. "You knew he passed," Croft nodded. "I did. That's why I'm here." Jack raised an eyebrow. People don't usually come out to the Tennessee mountains for condolences. Croft smiled faintly. "You're right. I came for something he left behind." Jack kept his stance steady. "You'll have to be more specific." Croft stepped forward 1 foot onto the porch, testing Jack's response. "I believe Elias left behind a collection. Valuable items. Items that don't belong to just anyone." "They belong to us," Jack said flatly. Croft's expression didn't change. "I don't want conflict, Mr. Miller. I just want what's mine." Jack didn't blink. "There's nothing here with your name on it." Croft chuckled softly. "I see. Well, maybe we should talk somewhere warmer." Jack stepped forward, blocking the door. "We're done talking." Croft's eyes hardened. "You don't understand what you're sitting on." Elias didn't collect junk. He held pieces of history, pieces people would kill for. "I understand," Jack said. "That's why I'm not letting you in." Croft's face lost its pretense of friendliness. His voice dropped. This isn't over, Mr. Miller. That vault. It's not just a collection. It's leverage. Elias used it to buy silence, influence, access. You really think a man like him built a treasure trove in the woods for no reason? Jack stared him down. I think he built it because he knew men like you would come looking. Croft's jaw clenched. Then, without another word, he turned and walked back to his SUV, a sleek black model with tinted windows, and drove off without looking back. Jack closed the door slowly, the weight of it like a wall. Nora was already grabbing the satellite phone from the cabinet. We need to call Harold. Jack nodded. And maybe someone else, who Jack's voice was low. Someone who knows how to guard, not just file paperwork. That night, the tension in the cabin thickened. Every creak sounded like a footstep. Every gust of wind a whisper. But Jack didn't sleep. He sat in the main room, eyes on the front door, shotgun across his lap. Nora stayed with him, curled up under a quilt, silent. Around 2 a.m, their landline rang once, just once, and then went dead. No one should have had that number. Jack stood, heart pounding. He unplugged the phone, checked the fuse box, then returned to his spot by the fire. When he sat down again, Nora whispered into the dark. He's not going away, is he? Jack shook his head. No. And next time he won't knock. Jack stood at the kitchen window watching the snow fall in thick, lazy flakes. The forest beyond the cabin was quiet again, but not peaceful. It was the kind of quiet that made your skin itch. The kind that warned something was just out of sight, waiting. He hadn't slept since Croft showed up. Nora was making eggs, but her mind wasn't on breakfast. She kept glancing toward the front door, the windows, even the hatch beneath the hearth. Every sound made her shoulders tighten. The house didn't feel like shelter anymore. It felt like a bunker. Jack finally turned from the window. We need help, not just legal, real help. Nora gave him a hard look. Who you don't trust, the sheriff. Finch can only do so much. We're on our own out here. He reached for the satellite phone. Not exactly. There's someone I used to know. Marine buddy. We haven't talked in years, but if he answers... Nora leaned in. You think he'd come? Jack stared at the number on the paper in his hand. He owes me. He dialed. 3 rings. Then a voice. Gruff. Sleepy. Yeah. Jack hesitated. Cal. A pause. Then sharper. Jack, it's been a while, too long. What's going on? Jack didn't waste time. I need someone who knows how to stand a perimeter and watch without blinking. Cal didn't ask why. He just said where and when. Blue Hollow, Tennessee. Tomorrow, if you can, you in trouble. Jack looked at Nora. Not yet. But it's coming. I'll be there by noon. Jack hung up and set the phone down. His hand was trembling just a little. Nora poured coffee into 2 mugs. You trust him? With my life, Jack said. And more importantly, with ours. They spent the rest of the day reinforcing doors, checking the backup generator, walking the perimeter. Jack even installed a trail cam near where Croft's tire tracks had appeared. He needed eyes everywhere now. When Cal Whitaker arrived the next day, he came on foot despite the snow. A 6'2" wall of muscle and gristle wrapped in a military parka and carrying a duffel bag that looked heavier than Nora. He said nothing at first, just hugged Jack with one arm, nodded at Nora, then scanned the tree line like he was already calculating fields of fire. Place smells like tension, Cal muttered as he stepped inside. Jack gave him the short version. The inheritance. The vault. Croft. The knock. The phone call. Cal listened, face unreadable, then finally grunted. Sounds like a war waiting for someone to fire the first shot. We're trying to avoid that, Jack said. I know. That's why I'm here. That night the three of them sat by the fire while Cal cleaned a sidearm he'd brought. Nora watched him closely. You think Croft will come back with people, she asked. He won't come back alone, Cal said. People like him don't make demands. They make statements. Loud ones. Jack looked toward the hearth. We're not giving him anything. Cal met his eyes. Then you better be ready to defend it. Because whatever's down in that vault isn't just treasure. It's leverage, secrets, power. Nora shivered, not from cold. He said as much. Cal set the gun down. Then this ain't about gold or paintings anymore. It's about control. They all went quiet after that. The next morning, Jack drove into town alone to get supplies, more canned food batteries, trail markers. While he was gone, Nora and Cal kept watch. It felt like a countdown had started. Something was coming. They could feel it pressing in. Jack returned around noon with more than groceries. Ashley. She was standing in front of the cabin when he pulled up. Dressed too nice for the snow arms, crossed expression unreadable. Jack's stomach twisted. What are you doing here? He asked as he got out. She didn't smile. You've been ignoring my calls. Not by accident. I heard about Elias. I know you're living in his house. I also know he was worth more than anyone thought. Jack clenched his jaw. You've been digging. Ashley stepped forward. I have a right to know. I'm your daughter. No, Jack said flatly. You were. Until we became your ATM. Her face flushed. I came to talk, that's all. He stared at her, searching for sincerity. There was some, but it was buried under something sharper. I'm not here for a handout, she said, softer now. But I heard rumors about a vault, hidden money. People are saying things. Jack felt his breath catch. Who, he asked. Does it matter? She snapped. The point is, if I know other people do too. Jack lowered his voice. You need to leave. Now. But Ashley didn't move. I'm not the enemy, Dad. You're not family either, Jack said. Not until you prove otherwise. Nora appeared in the doorway. Let her go, Jack. Ashley's gaze moved to her mother. For a moment, something flickered, remorse maybe. Fine, she said. But if anything happens, don't say I didn't try. She turned and walked back to her car. The tires skidded slightly as she pulled out. That night, Cal checked the trail cams. One had been knocked out. The footage showed a figure blurry and fast, passing through the frame just before the lens cracked. He didn't tell Jack right away. Instead, he sat alone in the shed, reviewing the footage again and again, and then he said out loud to no one, This isn't surveillance. It's a message. Inside the cabin, Jack sat beside Nora holding her hand. They both looked at the vault hatch beneath the fireplace. We're not just protecting treasure, he whispered. We're protecting the memory of the only man who ever believed in us. Nora nodded. Then we don't give them an inch. Jack looked out the window into the black woods. They'll test that. The snow hadn't stopped for 3 days. It buried the mountains in thick white silence, the kind that muffled sound and made even your thoughts feel slower. But Jack knew better. Silence didn't mean peace, not in Blue Hollow. Not anymore. Beneath that hush, something stirred. Cal moved like a ghost along the tree line every morning. No wasted steps. No unnecessary talk. Just eyes scanning for threats. He kept his rifle close a sidearm at his hip and a fixed blade in his boot. Jack had once called that paranoia. Now he called it necessary. Nora had developed her own rituals. She kept Elias's ledger in her lap every night, updating a parallel notebook with notes, thoughts, even drawings. She said it helped her sleep. Jack wasn't sure how she managed that at all anymore. "You writing the names down?" Jack asked softly that morning as he poured her a mug of coffee. She didn't look up. "What names?" Jack sipped his coffee. "The ones we'll never let get their hands on this." A pause. Then she smiled faintly. "I don't need to write those down. They're branded in." Jack nodded. "Same here." Around noon, Cal returned from his patrol, stamping snow off his boots. "We've got movement," he said. "Black sedan, tinted windows, Virginia plates, parked off the old logging road maybe a mile out." Jack's jaw clenched. "Croft." Cal nodded. "And he brought someone. Taller, younger. Moves like a federal man, but keeps his badge in his pocket. If he even has one." Nora's face darkened. "They're not hiding anymore." "Nope," Cal said. "They want to rattle the cage. See who bites." "They're underestimating us," Jack muttered. "Maybe," Cal said. "Or maybe they know something we don't." That evening, the wind picked up, hammering against the cabin like it was angry. Jack moved to reinforce the back windows when he heard Nora's startled voice from the kitchen. Ashley, she was standing near the counter, calm like she belonged. Her coat was half-zipped, hair wet from snow, a steaming mug of coffee in her hands. Jack's blood ran cold. "How the hell did you get in here?" Ashley turned casually. "Door was unlocked." "No," Wara snapped. "It wasn't." Ashley shrugged. "Well, it didn't stop me." Cal stepped in behind Jack, eyes narrowing, hand on his hip. "You here alone?" Ashley nodded, unbothered. "I just want to talk." Jack didn't move. "You've already said enough." "I came to warn you," she said. "Croft's making moves, big ones." "You're working with him," Jack said flatly. "I'm not," she snapped. "But I talked to him, I listened. That's more than either of you ever did with me." "You listened to a snake," Jack said. "You opened the gate to a wolf, and now you want a pat on the head." Ashley's eyes filled with frustration. "He knows things. About Elias. About the vault. About you." Jack's heart pounded, but his voice stayed cold. "You told him." "I didn't tell him everything," she said quickly. "But he's got documents. Old ones. Records Elias never destroyed. And he's got people. He's not some rogue psycho dad. He's connected. If you think you can outgun that, you're wrong." Jack shook his head. "You didn't come to warn us. You came to tell us to give up." Ashley stepped forward. "I came to stop you from getting killed." He's not bluffing. He's bringing lawyers, court filings. He's planning to seize the vault. Nora's voice cracked. "And you're okay with that? I'm not okay with any of this," Ashley shouted. "But if you keep acting like this is some noble stand, you're going to lose everything. And for what? A bunch of paintings, gold secrets that don't even belong to you." "They do belong to us," Jack growled. "Because Elias said so, and because we've protected them when no one else would." Ashley's voice softened. "I'm still your daughter." Jack's stare was like ice. "Then act like it. Ashley's shoulders slumped. She put down the mug and turned toward the door. At the threshold, she hesitated. He's coming back. With people. With proof. You won't be able to hide it much longer. She stepped out into the storm. The door clicked shut behind her. The cabin felt different now. Breached. Infected. She gave him information, Nora whispered. Yeah, Cal said, and she didn't even realize it. Jack stared into the fire. This changes everything. Nora looked at him. So what do we do? Jack turned, voice quiet and clear. We stop waiting. We fight. That night they opened the vault. Took only what mattered most, 3 crates. Ledgers, rare documents, 1 priceless painting, and Elias's coded journal. They moved them under darkness to a concealed root cellar Jack had discovered 2 years ago while chopping firewood. No one knew about it but him and now Cal and Nora. Back at the cabin, they left the rest behind, locked up tight. Not as bait. As a challenge. Jack cleaned his old rifle. Cal rigged a new motion sensor. Nora rewrote her notebook from memory twice. They were no longer protecting a secret. They were guarding a truth. A legacy. You think she'll tell him where we moved it? Nora asked quietly, as the power flickered. No, Jack said. She doesn't know that much. But she'll guess, Cal added. And guessing might be enough. Jack nodded. Then we be ready. For anything. Outside, the storm screamed. Inside, the storm began to find shape. The knock came at exactly 10 a.m. Not a threat this time, no shadows in the trees, no shattered cameras. Just 3 steady knocks on the cabin's front door, firm and measured like a delivery man who knew exactly what he was dropping off. Jack stood by the door, rifle slung but not raised. Cal was out back, circling the perimeter. Nora waited in the hallway, one hand clutching the notebook, the other resting on the butt of the revolver she swore she'd never fire. When Jack opened the door, he found 3 men standing on the porch. The first was Croft, smiling, composed, dressed in a dark gray trench coat, with a scarf too expensive for the Tennessee snow. Behind him stood the tall, younger man Cal had described. The third wore a crisp blue suit and carried a slim leather briefcase. Croft tipped his head. Morning, Jack. Jack said nothing. The suited man cleared his throat and stepped forward. Mr. Miller, my name is Peter Gaines. I'm a legal representative for Mr. Croft and affiliated parties. We're here to deliver a formal claim. Jack raised an eyebrow. A claim. Peter opened the briefcase and pulled out a thick manila folder. This document outlines prior ownership contracts, trust designations, and probate irregularities regarding the estate of Elias Whitmore. Jack didn't move. Croft stepped closer, just enough for his voice to drop an octave. What he means is, you're squatting on something that doesn't legally belong to you. You're wrong, Jack said. Gaines handed him the folder anyway. That's not for either of us to decide. That's for a judge. Nora appeared behind Jack, her voice tight. You think we're scared of paperwork? Croft smiled at her. No. I think you're scared of losing what doesn't belong to you. Jack took the folder. This land, this house, the vault, Elias left it all to us. And we're contesting that, Gaines said calmly. We've already filed in Nashville. You'll be served officially within the week. Jack flipped through the folder, scanning pages of legal jargon. His gut tightened. Croft wasn't bluffing this time. This was real. This was war, but fought in courtrooms and banks instead of forests and rifles. Let me be clear, Croft said. You don't need to lose everything. Just open the vault. Let us retrieve what was never Elias's to bequeath. We walk away clean. No harm. Jack closed the folder. You're not getting a damn thing. Gaines adjusted his tie. Then I advise you to retain legal counsel immediately. I've got one, Jack said. And he's meaner than both of you combined. Croft's smirk cracked slightly, but he turned without another word and descended the steps. The other two followed. As their SUV disappeared down the snow-packed road, Jack exhaled. Back inside, he tossed the folder on the kitchen table. Nora picked it up, flipping to the exhibits. Look at this, she muttered. They've got copies of old shipping ledgers, Elias's travel records, even tax filings. They're building a narrative, Jack said, that he stole from someone, that the inheritance was fraudulent. Cal came in, snow on his shoulders. What did I miss? Jack motioned to the folder. They're using the law now. Cal snorted. Of course they are. Guns make noise. Laws cut slow and deep. The law doesn't care who's right, Nora muttered. It only cares who can prove it. Jack looked at her, something heavy settling in his chest. Then we prove it. They spent the rest of the day scanning every document Elias had left them. Nora found coded receipts in the journal transactions Elias had kept out of banks for decades. Jack remembered something Elias once said while drunk on moonshine. The cleanest hands I ever had were the ones no one saw. Those hands had signed paintings under pseudonyms, bought artifacts through third-party buyers, and stored them underground for safekeeping, not for profit. Nora traced a signature on one document, comparing it to a letter in the crate from Paris. Look, it matches. Jack leaned in. That's him. That's how we prove ownership. Not by what Elias said, but by what he did. The next morning they called Harold Finch. He listened in silence as they explained the folder, the claim, and Croft's threat. You're going to need more than a few receipts, Harold said flatly. You need provenance, chain of custody, expert testimony. Jack ran a hand over his face. We don't have time to build all that. You don't have to, Harold replied. You just need to raise enough doubt that a judge stalls the order. Buy time. Shift the pressure. Cal took the phone. Then what? Then you get public, Harold said. You let people know who Croft really is. Shine the light. Jack hated the idea of publicity, but he hated losing more. That night they opened one of the remaining crates in the vault. Inside was a small, oil-painted portrait wrapped in silk, unsigned but unmistakably the work of Edward Hopper. A rare one. Jack stared at it. He never sold it. Nora looked up. Why? Because Elias didn't collect for money. He collected to keep things safe. From people like Croft. They carefully documented the piece, photographing it, with timestamps, making copies of the original correspondence tucked in the crate. By midnight, they had enough to draft an affidavit. But it wasn't just evidence. It was intention. They were no longer defending a windfall. They were protecting a man's legacy. At dawn, Jack stood outside on the porch, shotgun slung across his back. Snow still fell, but softer now. Cal joined him, coffee in hand. You think the courts will care? Cal asked. Jack shook his head. No. But the truth might. They stood in silence a while longer. Inside, Nora folded Elias's journal closed and whispered to herself, Let them come. The headlines hit 2 days later. At first, it was just a blip, an obscure blog post titled, Mystery Heirs of Montana Millionaire Refuse Court Order. But within 24 hours, it spread like wildfire across every news aggregator with a pulse. Jack didn't know who leaked the court claim. He didn't have to. Croft had finally gone public. Nora read the article aloud at the breakfast table, voice shaking from both anger and disbelief. "They're calling us squatters," she muttered, "accusing Elias of laundering stolen art, saying we're harboring assets linked to international trade violations." Jack leaned back in his chair. "They're not playing defense anymore. They're coming for blood." Cal stood by the window, jaw tight. "They want a reaction. They want you to lose control so they can paint you as unstable." Jack scoffed. "Let them try. I'm not the same man they pushed around 10 years ago." Nora placed the printout down carefully, as if it might explode. "You know what this means, right? They've moved the fight into the public arena, and the court of public opinion doesn't wait for evidence." Jack pushed his plate away. "Then it's time we give them something real to talk about." They spent the next 2 days digitizing everything in the vault, ledgers, old passports, correspondence, and photographs that clearly placed Elias in possession of the items long before any of Croft's alleged claims. Nora took point on organizing the files, while Jack recorded short video statements about the collection's history. But as they gathered their proof, the pressure outside grew. Reporters began showing up at the edge of the property, helicopters hovering just above the tree line like vultures waiting for something to diasu. The sheriff came by twice, pretending to check on them, but clearly shaken by the attention. Then the threats started. Phone calls with no voices, emails from untraceable accounts. A package on the porch with no return label filled with shredded pages from one of Elias's journals, proof someone had gotten close. Too close. Jack and Cal went on full lockdown. Cameras were repositioned. Traps were set near the southern trail. No one left the cabin without gear and a loaded weapon. But the real damage came from within. One night, while Nora and Jack reviewed documents, Cal stepped outside for his usual patrol. 10 minutes later, the power cut out. Not flickered. Cut. Jack grabbed a flashlight and ran to the breaker panel behind the cabin. It had been smashed clean and deliberate. Cal's boot prints led halfway into the woods, then vanished. They waited 2 hours. 3. At sunrise, Cal still hadn't returned. Jack wanted to believe it was a tactical retreat, that Cal had gone to trace a trail or flank someone trying to breach the line. But the longer the silence stretched, the more it turned into dread. Then Nora found the note. It was slipped into the pages of her ledger, folded twice, hand-scrawled in unfamiliar ink. "You can keep pretending Elias was a saint. But some truths were never meant to be buried, and now they won't stay quiet." Beneath it, a second sheet, a photocopy of an old letter between Elias and someone named Victor Zelezny, a Czech smuggler, flagged in multiple Interpol files. The letter described a deal involving untraceable transport of art during conflict periods and a vault location almost identical to the one beneath the cabin. Nora's hands trembled. "Is this real?" Jack took the note, reading it over twice. "If it is, Croft has more than legal claims. He has leverage, blackmail, a story the press would eat alive." Nora looked at him. Could it be true? Jack didn't answer immediately. "Elias told me once, sometimes the truth is messier than the lie that protects it." "That's not a no." "No," Jack admitted. "It's not." The next day, Jack drove into town under cover of early morning fog. He needed Harold Finch. Not just as a lawyer, but as a man who'd known Elias in ways Jack hadn't. Finch opened the door to his office before Jack could even knock. He looked like he hadn't slept in days. "You saw the stories," Jack said. Finch nodded. "They've filed a motion for emergency injunction. If it goes through, you'll be forced to surrender the vault's contents into state custody until ownership can be adjudicated." Jack slammed his palm on the desk. They'll strip it bare before we ever see a courtroom. I know, Finch said. That's why you need to listen. He reached into a drawer and pulled out a thick, aged envelope. He set it on the desk between them. Elias left this with me 20 years ago, Finch said. He told me not to open it unless you were in danger, not from guns, but from stories. Jack opened it slowly. Inside were 4 things: a signed confession, detailing how Elias had once participated in the smuggling of art out of Soviet-occupied territories, a list of aliases he had used to make those acquisitions untraceable, a map of every vault he had ever constructed, with notes on who knew about them, and finally a letter addressed to Jack. It read, "If you're reading this, then someone has tried to unearth what I buried. Not everything I did was legal, but everything I did was just. I took from the hands of tyrants and put those pieces where they could not be corrupted again. If you must expose me, do so in full, but don't ever let the half-truths win." Jack folded the letter with care. "This won't protect us," No, Finch said, "but it might protect the story. And sometimes that's enough." When Jack returned home, he gave Nora the letter. She read it in silence. Then she lit a match and set the threatening note Croft's photocopy on fire. "No more secrets," she said. "We tell the whole truth, even the ugly parts." That night, Jack uploaded the letter, the map, and Elias's confession to the secure drive they'd prepared for the press. And then he recorded a final message. He sat in front of the fire, face lit only by the flames, and spoke into the camera with the quiet resolve of a man who'd already made peace with what was coming. Elias Whitmore wasn't a saint, but he was a guardian. He gave us something to protect, and now we give it back, not to the courts, not to the media, but to the truth. And the truth, no matter how deep you bury, it always finds air. He hit upload. Then he turned to Nora. "Whatever happens next," he said, "we face it together." And for the first time in days, she smiled. "We always have." Outside, the storm had finally broken, but something else was just beginning. The morning sky was a sheet of cold steel when the convoy arrived: 3 black SUVs, a county sheriff cruiser, and a government-marked van with tinted windows. Snow crunched under tires as they rolled up the long gravel path to the cabin. Jack stood on the porch with Nora beside him. Neither of them moved. Cal had returned just hours before, limping, bruised but alive. He leaned against the wall now, arms crossed, gaze fixed like a sentry on the lead vehicle. The door opened, and Croft stepped out, clean-shaven, gloved hands tucked into the pockets of his long wool coat. A U.S. Marshal followed, holding a thick envelope marked with a federal seal. Croft called out, "This is your final warning. The court has authorized seizure under emergency jurisdiction. If you resist, it becomes criminal obstruction." Jack didn't flinch. "Then I guess it's time to choose what kind of story you want your name in." Croft smiled like a wolf. "Don't be stupid, Jack." "I'm not," Jack replied. "That's why I released everything." Croft's smile wavered. Nora stepped forward, holding up a tablet with the screen facing them. It showed a media dashboard, hundreds of reposts, trending hashtags. Elias's full confession, photos of the vault, the forged ownership claims, and a link to a 17-minute exposé uploaded just 12 hours ago. Jack added, "To your stories already out there, along with ours. People know who Elias was, who you are, what this really is." Croft's mouth tightened, his calm cracking. The marshal looked at him, then at the folder in his hands. "Sir, we need to confirm chain of custody before—" "Not now," Croft snapped. The air between them thickened. No one moved. Even the forest seemed to be holding its breath. Then Cal spoke, voice low but sharp. "You'll walk away, or you'll be on camera dragging an old man, his wife, and a wounded vet off their land with the whole damn country watching." Croft turned slowly toward him. "You think people care about sympathy, they care about money, about order." "No," Jack said. "They care about truth. And that's the one thing you never understood." Croft looked at him for a long time. Then without a word he turned and walked back to the SUV. The marshal followed, unsure. The cruiser reversed first. Then the rest of the convoy followed. No arrests, no seizure, no violence, just retreat. Silence returned to the mountain, but it didn't feel empty anymore. It felt earned. That night, the fire in the hearth burned brighter than it had in weeks. The storm had passed both outside and within. The house still stood. So did they. Jack poured 3 glasses of bourbon, one for him, one for Nora, one for Cal. He raised his glass without saying anything. Nora touched hers to his. Cal simply nodded. They drank in silence, the kind that doesn't need to be filled. "You think it's really over?" Nora asked. Jack looked into the flames. "I don't know. Maybe not for them, but for us. Yeah. I think we've done what we had to do." Cal leaned forward. "And if they come again," Jack smiled faintly, "then we remind them who they're dealing with." In the following weeks, the media moved on. Another scandal. Another distraction. But the truth had taken root. Letters poured in, some angry, most grateful. Historians, art collectors, survivors of war whose families remembered the names Elias had once protected. And there were the critics, too. Those who questioned Elias's methods. Called him a thief with good PR. Said Jack and Nora were opportunists guarding blood money. But Jack didn't care. Because for every accusation, there was a letter like the one from Prague, from a museum curator who found a missing piece of her great-grandfather's stolen collection in the online archive Jack had posted. She didn't want the painting back. She just wanted the world to know it existed. Jack wrote her back personally. In the end, they moved only one item from the vault permanently, a bronze compass Elias had carried through 3 countries across borders and into hiding. They mounted it in a frame near the front door. Below it, a plaque. "What's right isn't always what's safe, but it's always worth finding." Months later, the cabin grew quiet again. No more reporters, no more trucks. Just the wind and the forest, and the people who chose to stay. Ashley returned once alone. She didn't speak at first. Just stood by the porch steps like she wasn't sure if she should knock. Jack opened the door. They stared at each other a long while. Then she said, "I didn't come for the vault." Jack stepped aside. Inside, she sat with Nora by the fire. Cal said nothing, just nodded at her once and left to walk the ridge. Ashley took a breath. "I was angry. I wanted to believe the worst because it made leaving easier." "You were scared," Nora said. "We all were." Ashley looked at her father. "Is there anything left?" To fix, Jack thought about that for a long moment. Finally, he said, "There's always something to rebuild. That's the part they don't tell you." Ashley nodded. "I'd like to help." They didn't hug. Not yet. But when she stayed the night, Jack left the lamp on outside her room, just in case. That spring, the snow melted fast. The land drank deeply, and wildflowers rose like forgiveness from the frozen soil. Jack and Nora sat on the porch one morning, watching the sunrise spill gold over the treetops. "What do you think he'd say?" Nora asked. Elias, she nodded. Jack smiled. He'd probably say we made too much noise. Nora laughed. He was wrong about some things. Yeah, Jack said, but not about what matters. He reached into his pocket and pulled out the compass. Its face was worn smooth, but it still pointed true. They sat in silence, listening to the birds return. The forest breathe again. Not guardians anymore. Just people. Just family. And behind them, beneath layers of earth and time, the vault still rested. Not a secret. Not a weapon. Just a place where history had been kept safe until the world was ready to know it. Some truths had been buried. But now finally, they were free.